Welcome to the deep dive. Have you ever stopped to think about how cars went from being this, well, crazy idea to something we see absolutely everywhere?
It's quite a jump, isn't it?
It really is. Today we're going to zoom right in on the very beginning of that story and look at a truly special car, the 1903 Krastin.
Ah, yes, the Krastin. Not a household name, maybe, but fascinating.
Exactly. We've dug into some really interesting stuff about this unique machine and the person who built it. So get ready to hear about an inventor you probably haven't met before and a car that's had, well, an unbelievable journey.
That's right. When we picture the first cars, a few famous names usually pop into our heads. Ford, Benz.
Sure.
But the early days of the automobile were actually this whirlwind of creativity. I mean, tons of different people trying out their own designs. Our sources today sort of pull back the curtain on one of those early innovators and the remarkable car he created.
Okay, let's unpack this then. At the heart of our deep dive is Augusts Krastiņš,
Yeah.
who came to America from Latvia, and the one and only 1903 Krastin car that still exists today.
That single survivor, yeah.
It's a tale that spans continents, from the old Russian Empire all the way to the United States, and then, incredibly, back to Latvia, where this super rare vehicle lives now.
It's quite the round trip.
What struck me right off the bat is that back then, the early 1900s, the car industry was just wide open, like a playground for inventors.
Completely. And what's fascinating here is just how many people were jumping into this brand new world of automobiles. There was a real buzz, about technology and how it could change our lives. August's Krastiņš was right there in that initial wave of excitement.
So who was this August Krastiņš? Our sources tell us he was born way back in 1859 in Liepāja, which is in Latvia now.
Right. Back then, part of the Russian Empire. And yeah, 1859. Most people couldn't even imagine owning a car.
Exactly.
And he came from a pretty simple background. His dad was a blacksmith, but he clearly had this natural talent for working with tools and machines, became really skilled as a locksmith, a machinist, worked on a big estate.
So hands-on skills from early on.
Definitely. And that early experience would be super important later, obviously, when he started building cars.
Makes sense. And then he took this huge leap, moving all the way to Germany in 1892 and then on to the United States. That's a massive move for anyone.
Oh, absolutely. It was a time when lots of people were leaving Europe for America, hoping for better opportunities, a fresh start. Krastin's found work in Cleveland, Ohio, at a factory, I think.
Yeah, the Brush Electric Appliance Factory.
Right. Brush Electric. And soon after, his family joined him.
That's what the sources say. His wife, Eva, and their sons, Paul and Arnold, arrived around 1894. You could just imagine the mix of hope and, well, the challenges of starting over in a new country.
Precisely. And it seems Krastin didn't waste any time putting his skills towards this exciting new invention, the automobile. By 1896, while he was still working at that appliance factory, he actually built his own car.
Wow, while still holding down another job.
Yeah. And get this, it was apparently based on a Daimler model.
A Daimler. That was pretty advanced stuff for the time.
It really was. Shows real drive, initiative.
But he didn't stop there, and here's where it gets really interesting for me. In 1901, he designed his own car, which he called the Krastin gasoline automobile. And he even started his own company, the Krastin Automobile MFG company.
Yeah, going from employee to entrepreneur.
That's a really bold move, starting your own car company back then.
It was a huge step. And the sources reveal something, well, pretty amazing. In 1901, investors put a whopping $200,000 into Krastin's company.
$200,000 in 1901 money.
Exactly. Now, to give you some context, Henry Ford got $50,000 less than that when he started the Ford Motor Company just a couple of years later.
Whoa, serious?
Seriously, that really shows you how much faith some people must have had in what Krastin's was doing.
That's incredible.
This is substantial early investment. It reveals the significant optimism around not just the automobile itself, but Krastin's specific vision. It wasn't a guaranteed success for anyone back then, so getting that level of funding really speaks volumes about how people saw his designs, maybe the novelty or perceived superiority.
Wow, okay, that puts a whole new spin on things.
Yeah.
So what about the cars themselves? The first Krastin brand car came out in 1902, and apparently the ads for it made some pretty big claims.
Yeah, the advertising suggested the Krastin car was quite different, from the typical American cars being made at the time. And our sources highlight some of the clever inventions he patented back in 1901 that likely backed up those claims.
Like what made his cars stand out from the crowd then?
Okay, well, for starters, he had patents for self-cleaning Spark plugs.
Self-cleaning spark plugs. How would that even work?
Good question. The specifics aren't detailed, but think about how early engines sometimes had trouble with spark plugs getting dirty, fouling up.
Right, causing misfires and stuff.
Exactly. So a self-cleaning design, whatever it involved, would have been a huge plus. Made the car more reliable, easier to keep running.
Okay, that's neat.
What else? He also designed a way to change gears using the steering wheel.
On the steering wheel?
Yeah, pretty innovative for the time. Plus, he came up with an improved design for the carburetor. You know, the bit that mixes fuel and air.
Key part of the engine.
Very key. In total, our sources say he registered 12 U.S. patents. So quite a bit of smart thinking packed into these early cars.
12 patents. Wow. That's a lot of clever ideas all in one machine. Now let's talk about the star of our deep dive, the 1903 Krastin car that, made it through all these years.
It's Survivor.
Right. One source mentioned it might actually be a 1904 model, so there's a little mystery there. But tell us about this actual car that we can still see today.
Yeah, the fact that any 1903 car, let alone a Krastin, has survived for over a century is truly remarkable. This particular car, the one now in the Riga Motor Museum, it gives us this real, tangible link to the past.
So technically, what are we looking at?
Okay, technically, it had the engine in the front, which was becoming a more common and, frankly, practical layout at the time.
Right, not engine under the seat or in the back.
Exactly. It also used rear-wheel drive with something called a Cardan shaft.
Cardan shaft? Sounds technical.
It is a bit. But basically, it's a rotating mechanical part, like a drive shaft, that sends power from the engine to the wheels. It's a more advanced and smoother way to do this compared to some of the noisy chain systems that were common back then.
Okay, got it. So more refined than some other early cars. And it wasn't super basic, right? It had a bit more going on.
Definitely not basic. It had a 3-speed gearbox.
3 speeds. That's quite advanced for 1903.
It really was. Gave the driver more control, more flexibility than the single or maybe 2-speed transmissions you found in many early cars.
And the body.
The body style is described as a tonneau type, which basically means it had an open passenger compartment in the back, usually with a door at the rear, made it easier for passengers to climb in.
Ah, the rear entrance. You see those on old photos.
Exactly. And here's a really cool little detail. It had a steering wheel that could fold down.
A foldable steering wheel. Seriously, why?
Well, you can imagine, right? Maybe to give you more room to get in and out of the driver's seat.
Huh. That sounds both useful and kind of, fancy for the early 1900s.
Exactly. It shows that Krastens was thinking about the people who would actually use his car, trying to make it more convenient even in these very early stages of car design.
So, okay, we've got this really innovative car, seems well thought out, and a company that started with a lot of money behind it. What happened? Why isn't Krastin a name we all know, like Ford or Benz?
Well, sadly, the story takes a really unfortunate turn in 1904. A fire. A big one.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it broke out and completely destroyed the Krastin factory. This was just a huge setback because several cars that were actually being built were also lost in the fire.
Oh, that's terrible news. You can imagine how much that would hurt a brand new business.
Yeah.
Just devastating.
Absolutely. And the knock-on effect. The fire caused investors to lose faith in the company. Understandable, maybe, but fatal. The money to keep it going just dried up.
So they had to close.
Ultimately, yeah. The Krastin Automobile MFG company had to close down. It's kind of a classic example, isn't it, of how unexpected events, sheer bad luck sometimes, can derail even the most promising ventures.
It really is a tough break. But it sounds like Krastens didn't just give up on inventing altogether. He tried other business ideas later on.
That's right. He seems to have been persistent. In 1909, he teamed up with someone named Paul Dinger, started a company called D&K MFG.
Sure.
And later in his life, our sources say he also worked on making things like electric refrigerators and machines for farming. So he remained an inventor, an entrepreneur, just not in the car business anymore.
And he eventually passed away in Cleveland in 1942. It's quite a story. Lots of initial excitement and promise, but then real disappointment too.
Yeah.
So where does Augusts Krastiņš fit into the big picture? The whole story of how cars were invented and developed.
Well, our sources rightly point out that he was definitely one of the early pioneers in the automotive world, no question. He was working during that period of incredible excitement, rapid progress in the industry, just a ferment of ideas.
Right. It's easy to forget that in those early days, it wasn't just a few big car companies. There were just all sorts of different makes and models popping up all over the place.
Precisely. Hundreds of them eventually. And it's important to remember where Krastens came from, too. Riga, the region where he was born in Latvia, was actually a significant center for industry in the early 20th century.
Ah, interesting. So there was already a sort of culture of engineering there.
Yeah, a culture of innovation, engineering, new ideas in that part of the world. The Riga Motor Museum's exhibits specifically show how car making in Latvia actually got started during this time when Riga was a key industrial city within the Russian Empire.
And that 1903 Krastin is a really important piece for that museum, isn't it? Kind of a star exhibit.
Oh, absolutely. It's described as one of their main exhibition treasures, and crucially, the only one of his cars known to survive after, over 120 years now.
Incredible.
It gives us this special look into this early chapter of car history, not just in America, but also connecting it right back to Latvia.
It really makes you wonder about all the other inventors from that time, whose stories we just don't know as well. Now, earlier you mentioned Carl Benz. How does what Krastens was doing compare to someone like him, who is, much more famous as a car pioneer?
That's a great question. Carl Benz, of course, is famous for his Benz patent motor wagon from way back in 1885. That's generally considered the first proper car powered by an internal combustion engine.
The three-wheeler, right.
That's the one. Our sources even give some details about it. 3 wheels, engine in the back, electric ignition, a carburetor, cooling system, transmission, even a basic brake. One of Benz's main challenges early on was just figuring out how to steer the thing properly.
Ah, the steering problem.
Exactly, which is partly why he started with that simpler 3-wheel design. Easier to manage the steering.
Okay, so while Benz was maybe focused on just getting the basic concept working and solving steering, Krastens, a bit later, was working on these other new ideas, like his self-cleaning spark plugs and the gear shift on the wheel.
Exactly. You could sort of see it that way. While both were pioneers, they were tackling slightly different challenges, maybe at slightly different stages, and coming up with their own unique solutions for these brand new machines. Krastens was developing his own distinct features for his cars. It just shows the different paths people were taking in the really early days of the automobile.
So even though his company didn't last as long as Benz's.
Right. Even though Krastin Automobile was short-lived, the innovations he came up with, and especially the fact that his 1903 car still exists, gives us a really valuable look into that incredibly diverse and experimental time.
It's just amazing that this one single 1903 Krastin has managed to survive all this time. It really makes you think about the journey it must have taken. We know it's now in the Riga Motor Museum. How did it actually end up there?
Well, the museum itself has an interesting story. It was started back in 1989 by a group of people who just loved old cars, the Latvia Antique Automobile Club.
Ah, enthusiasts preserving history.
Exactly. And over the years, it's grown to be the biggest museum of antique vehicles in the Baltic countries. It really shows how dedicated people are to preserving this kind of history.
That's fantastic. And the Krastin car itself made its way back to Latvia fairly recently, didn't it, in 2012?
Yes, that's right. In 2012, a Latvian collector actually acquired the car, brought it back home, so to speak.
Wow.
And then in a really wonderful twist, in 2016, this very 1903 Krastin was shown at the famous Bonhams London-to-Brighton veteran car run.
The London-to-Brighton. That's a big deal for old cars.
It really is. And not only did it successfully complete the run, which is an achievement in itself for a car that old,
Totally.
but it also won an award for being the most elegant car.
No way. That's amazing. Over 100 years after it was built, it's still turning heads and winning prizes. What an incredible story arc for that car.
It truly is, and it really highlights why it's so important to look after these rare pieces of automotive history. Each one tells a story, doesn't it? Not just about the technology, but about the people, the ones who dreamed them up, built them, drove them.
So, okay, to kind of bring it all together then. We've taken this deep dive into the story of Augusts Krastiņš, a Latvian-American inventor, definitely one of the early car pioneers, and his remarkable 1903 Krastin automobile. We've learned about the unique things about his design, those patents, the foldable wheel, then the sad story of the fire that stopped his company in its tracks, and the amazing survival of this one single car that's now a treasure back in the Riga Motor Museum.
Exactly. Krastin's contribution, even though his company didn't last, it reminds us that the early days of cars were this really exciting, often unpredictable time, just full of ambitious inventors and groundbreaking ideas, many of which, like his, played a vital role, even indirectly, in shaping the car industry we know today.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it, just how many other brilliant inventors and maybe amazing machines from that early era have just been lost to history.
Countless, probably.
Yeah. The fact that this 1903 Krastin still exists is such a powerful reminder of all the untold stories that might be hidden in the early history of the machines that now have such a huge impact on our world. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.